This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battlerite Sage. So today I want to talk about something, and this is more of a discussion than a guide, because if you read the title of the video, you've probably already formed an opinion on the subject. So what I want to talk about today is, are there any hard counters in Battlerite? It may be a little confusing because there are two kinds of counters when you're talking about Battlerite. The Q ability that a bunch of champions have and you really want to avoid hitting, and the kind of counter that you talk about in most other games where one champion can totally outplay or shut down another. And today we're talking about the second one. And I'm sure most of you guessed that by the fact that I said hard counters, but I thought I'd just clarify just in case. So first off, what is a hard counter? What would that look like exactly? Straight off the bat, there are going to be disagreements on what constitutes a hard counter. And honestly, you could probably argue that most video games don't have hard counters at all. It's not like rock, paper, scissors where rock beats scissors or whatever. There's usually some room, even if it's a hard matchup, for there to be some outplay potential. But it's still a term that you hear used anyway. The common standpoint is when one champion can totally dominate another in a 1v1 situation. So if the two of you are left alone, one will just flat out dominate the other. And the other way of thinking about it, and this is my personal take on the whole thing, a hard counter is when one champion totally shuts down the value of another champion. They don't necessarily have to outright kill them. Just to make a quick reference to Overwatch, because that particular disagreement on what a counter is always winds me up a bit. Take a hero like Pharah, who can fly around shooting rockets at people. People will often think of Soldier or McCree as a counter to Pharah. And don't get me wrong, they're certainly part of it, but actually, given the right set of circumstances, Pharah can still two-shot your support before you even kill her. Her time to kill is really low if she has good aim, so if she gets the jump on your team, you have to have absolutely godlike aim and reactions to kill her before she kills one of you. So I wouldn't exactly call that a hard counter. You're not preventing her from doing what she needs to do. On the other hand, you could take a tank like D.Va who can literally eat those rockets. She actually prevents Pharah from killing anyone. So to me, preventing your opponent from doing what they want to do is what makes something a hard counter. If you can stop them achieving anything, you don't even need to kill them. They just become a non-issue. And I know it seems weird making a reference to another game when we're talking about Battlerite, but the reason I mention Overwatch is because counters are a lot more clear-cut in that game. In Battlerite, things aren't nearly as cut and dry as they are in Overwatch. But there are still some favourable and unfavourable matchups, so let's take a look at some of those. First, let's quickly talk about CROAK versus Oldur. This is a matchup that a lot of people are aware of. It's pretty well known that CROAK can really dominate Oldur in a 1v1 situation. In general, if you're trying to figure out who counters what, just think about the abilities each champion has and how they'll need to respond to each other. And in the case of Oldur and CROAK, CROAK just has an answer to everything that Oldur throws at him. CROAK massively outclasses Oldur when it comes to mobility, so kiting him isn't that easy. And Oldur's main CC, his Petrify, is actually cleansed when CROAK goes invisible. So in a vacuum, yeah, CROAK beats Oldur. And if your game ends up in a clutch situation with CROAK versus Oldur, that might be an issue. But this game isn't about 1v1s. It's a team game. Oldur can just choose not to take the 1v1. CROAK might have an answer to all of your abilities, but if he uses everything he has to deal with you, he won't have anything left to deal with your allies' abilities. And even if your team doesn't peel for you, it's not like you're having no impact on the game while the CROAK is tunneling you. You can still put out some healing, you can still throw out some damage, so while the CROAK is definitely a real threat to you, he's not exactly preventing you from doing your job. A good CROAK can certainly make life hard for Oldur, but it's unlikely that he'll totally shut you down. Another difficult matchup is POLOMA versus ALYSIA or ASHKA. POLOMA has a similar issue against these champions. They just have an answer to anything she throws at them. In a straight M1 trade, she obviously loses. ASHKA and ALYSIA just put out a lot more damage with their mouse 1 attacks. In the case of some supports, they can mitigate this somewhat by self-healing. But POLOMA's self-healing comes from healing her allies, EXQ, EX space, and maybe her wolf if she takes the right for it. If the ASHKA or ALYSIA are smart, they won't even get close enough for a fear, so you can rule that out. And if we're talking strictly 1v1 where maybe you're cut off from your group or something, POLOMA's not going to get any self-healing by healing her team. So the only way she's going to get a self-heal is by using EX space or maybe her wolf with the right. It's not exactly easy, but it is totally possible for ASHKA or ALYSIA to just iframe the EX space or block it with their R abilities. And even if they don't block that particular ability, they could block the wolf instead, which is her main burst and maybe even a self-heal as well. So needless to say, given equal skill, in a 1v1 situation, ASHKA and ALYSIA can totally dominate a POLOMA. But just like with the other example, they might win in a 1v1, but they don't prevent POLOMA from doing what she needs to do in a team fight. My point is, when you're thinking about who counters what, you need to take the whole team into account. Personally, I don't think the presence of one champion on the enemy team will ever make your pick worthless. However, that doesn't mean the enemy comp can't make you feel useless. One very annoying matchup that I've experienced on both sides is THORN or ROOK versus Battleship comp. If you have a regular setup with THORN as your melee and you're playing into 2 ranged DPS and a POLOMA, the THORN is going to have a really hard time. Battleship comp just has an answer to anything that THORN does. It doesn't mean THORN's team can't win, but THORN has to play so incredibly carefully and passively that you're just going to wish you were playing something else. If you try to engage with your space, the ranged DPS will just kite you, bait your husk, and then punish you while you can't even get a single M1 off. And if you try to engage with entangle into grip, the POLOMA can just other side your target. So the win condition for THORN's team in this matchup is to just poke with M2, constantly pull the orb with his Q, and just hope the enemy makes a mistake so you can get a proper engagement. But if the ranged team plays it right, even if they don't totally shut down THORN, they're going to make the game really dull for him. And I feel like this matchup is even worse if you replace THORN with ROOK. Rook's range poke isn't as good as THORN, and he doesn't have the orb denial that THORN does, so he actually has to go in to deal damage. And this is even worse. If the enemy team dodges your rush and baits your counter, you're literally dead. I know that's the case for Rook against most matchups, but it's even worse against Battleship comp. And the problem is, even if they don't dodge the rush, you're still liable to get out-traded. Honestly though, when you look at it, there's almost always some way that you can get around the issue. I'm saying that THORN and Rook have a hard time versus Battleship comp, but at the same time, it's totally winnable if you play it right. You just have to play in a really boring and passive way if the enemy team's smart. In top level play, the game is certainly very comp dependent, but at least on an individual level, I don't think there are any hard counters in Battlerite. Certainly not to the same extent you might see in other games. But hey, that's just my opinion. As I said, this video is just an opinion piece, so feel free to disagree and share your thoughts on the subject down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more Battlerite guides, news, and discussion. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some unique rewards, then head over to patreon.com/battleritesage. And don't forget to check out twitch.tv/battleritesage. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.